Greeting dear friends, I have with me Mr. Sumit Kumar Sinha. Mr. Sumit Kumar Sinha, the founder of Happie Hemp Pvt Limited. Mr. Sumit is a BTech in biotechnology from MIT Manipal. He's a postgraduate from IGNOU in applied statistics, and he has also done his executive education from IIMB in big data analytics. So today we'll try to understand more about Mr. Sumit Kumar Sinha and his venture Happie Hemp Pvt Limited. Welcome Sumit, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for having me. It's really a pleasure talking to you about startup and things and beyond it.
Thank you Sumit. You are a biotech engineer, and you also studied big data analytics, and you also studied applied statistics. What was the reason for you to, from biotechnology to mathematics and big data? Was there any specific reason for studying that?
Well, I mean, the shift did not happen for any particular reason, frankly speaking. I've always had love for mathematics and stats across my school days to, even the college time period. I had a huge interest in exploring biotechnology and how biotechnology can help solve multiple problems across the globe. Over a period of time, mathematics was very much part of our, curriculum as well. So I guess when you look at data sciences, you don't look at as a individual stream or as a standalone. Data science is something which is spread across all the segment of the work, be it healthcare, be it finances, okay, be it constructions, be it, so many spaces where data science is exhaustively used. So you can always take that, getting a data-based or data-backed understanding is very important, even in the current scenarios, because data-driven methodology, decision-making is very, very, important for a business, for a venture to grow about. So I think this shift was very natural. I studied, decision making with numbers in my, college as well. So the shift was not something I was completely going beyond what I've ever studied. But yes, it was not core biotechnology. I would kind of agree to that. But then biostatistics again is a very essential part of, whole. Biotechnology, you can call it, or the biology in sense, and finance and bio is something from where the statistics have picked up a lot. A lot of researchers in the earlier days, because now big data and analytics has come up across all these segments, but primarily, if you just go back around 3 decades, it was a very influential in the biostatistics area or the finances area. So this is how would I say, it's not something that I went completely off the grid. It's just some a bit of diversion around what I was doing or studied across my course.
So when you were studying your biotechnology, did you ever think that you would get into this entrepreneurship domain, or were you after placements? How was it?
So frankly speaking, the entire this is actually a very blended answer, frankly speaking, because when I was in college in MIT, we had a lot of opportunities to work for clubs and all those doing seminars or fests. So that gave us a lot of exposure to take a lot of leaderships roles, working in the finance area where we're going for funding or investment for the fest, organizing the operations part of it. So creating a flair to do or lead things was developed, but then there was no solid conviction that we have to do a startup, right? There was no solid conviction. And frankly speaking, if 4 years back, it's almost 8 years now, I would have never thought that I'll actually do a startup in biotechnology. So, okay, because I spun out to data sciences, and this happened when I was actually studying. So as I said, when I got introduced to all the decision making by data, my interest kind of started to get diverged or get attracted towards the data-based approach of, even the job point of view or from a career point of view, because it was very, very natural for me, using mathematics, using numbers for arriving at decisions that a top leadership can take, or even, something that can actually influence the company's entire course of a journey. So that's a very interesting space. And entrepreneurship is something which I realized that I have to do somewhere around 2018, I believe. I think it was around 4.5 years or so. I was out of the college, worked in startups, multiple startups. I've mostly worked in startups because the exposure you get and the leadership you can develop, or the impact you can create with your work. And then I kind of developed that the next thing for me in life should be doing something bigger than just being a data scientist. Right, I have to create more value for the community, for the society, and that is when I started iterating around ideas. And one day I came across hemp, and I was so amazed to know how amazing this plant is. I mean, so beautiful this plant is. Detach the stigma, and we can create such wonderful things that is beyond the imagination that someone who has never understood the hemp is, and something that we duly need right now. So this kind of, and it was never, it was nothing that was out of my scope. I was just going back to the same biotechnology that I came from. So my life was always in the circle around data and biotech, and this is where I am in my own. Doing a venture is obviously something out of your comfort zone, but then biotechnology and data backed journey of life is something that is very central to who I am.
Do you come from an entrepreneurial background, in the sense, are your parents into their own business, or how was it?
No. I don't think anyone in my family, even an extended family, is in business. Most, I think all of them are, employed in various distinguished organizations. Yes, I don't think not even my cousins, I would say, are into, may have picked up, but I don't think anyone from our generation above us are into it. But they are into leadership positions to various organizations across India.
So when you got into this space, how was the reaction at your home or in your home? Were your parents happy, or was there some sort of a resistance, or how was it?
So in my life, there have been instances where I've taken non-conventional decisions. Okay, I mean, I would call jumping from a job to a entrepreneurship as a non-conventional, because it's not something very common to do. So the first non-conventional decision I took was immediately after college. So I had a job from a multinational software company, but since my keen focus was into get into a data sciences or analytics job, I took a job with with a startup that was paying exceedingly lower than the job offer I had from the college. So this was something which they could not kind of make peace with it, that if you have a job offer from a reputed organization who's already paying you higher, then why would you take something like this, right? So, but then over a period of time, this decision came out to be, came out well in a longer run. And the second non-conventional decision which I took was quitting my job, going back to IMB for a year's program. Okay, because when you are in the whole, job flow, normally you won't do it, right? I mean, once you have settled down, gain some experience, you try to build up on that. But as soon as I had some experience of data sciences, I realized that I need to actually go back to college, study way more than that I know, and then again come back, be more trained, be more informed about how I can contribute. So this was slightly, again, because there was a heavy cost involved, for this, the opportunity cost of doing this, the time as well as the amount of input that you give in terms of the money for the whole program was again high. But then again, on a longer term, it came out to be a very good or a decision, because I've literally grown very well in that career, touch wood. Now this was something which I did not pass one day all of a sudden. So it took me around 6-7 months to slowly pass information that I'm going to do something. This is cannabis, this is hemp, this is what happens. So over a period of time, I kind of warmed up for what is about to come. Okay, so that one day when I decide, they are not completely out of place, that this is something we never imagined. So it took my own pace of passing on the information. But again, one thing which they were like, cool, if you want to do it, but make sure that you give your best, and given the fact that it is a cannabis or a hemp space, to not end up on the wrong side of the regulators. So that's always been the stigma that cannabis has brought across the homes and the and people's mind.
So, when you started this, how was the funding pattern? Did it come from your family, or did you go for a crowdsourcing, or what was your way of funding it?
So far, across my career, I've made some investments over a period of time. So the first source of money was pulling out my investments and my savings, and then the second, because once we got started, we have the product out, people are using it, people are loving it. The idea remains that you try to build upon that. So obviously, for us to infuse capital becomes important. So the second round of funding came from the family. We have not raised any external funding so far. I believe the next quarter we'll try to raise seed round or a pre-seed round to kind of go more exhaustive in the marketing and the distribution of the product.
Now your co-founder Shagun Dwivedi. So how you people met, and how you to say if two people have to meet and start the same venture, they should think alike. So how did it happen?
So Shagun and I are classmates from college, and we have a third founder as well, Rachel. I'll talk about him as well. So I think all three of us have a very similar mindset of doing or kind of giving it back to the to the society. Shagun has a very extensive career into I would say social sector. She's been part of the Teach for India, and then now she has taken up a role into e-commerce spaces. She's been doing into the e-commerce and the online digital marketing and the sales job. So as a mindset, as an individuals, we always had a very one focused vision of how do we want to see and create value in the society. And same goes for Rachit. Rachit is someone who I met while I was working in one of the startups, a very excellent engineer, and again has the same philosophy. So the key, what remained to us, is that the underlying purpose that we want to actually serve. And given that we all three have some or the other motivation to be a leader, not to be led by, we kind of club together a lot of experiences which are cross. I mean, I come out from a very biotechnology or a plant genetics space. Shagun comes out from a digital marketing and sales. Rachit comes out as a hardcore technologist, right? So club together, we kind of create a non-overlapping team with one focus of creating impact. And given the scenario that we are in, and our primary job is to help people, alleviate from the mental health problems, and cannabis does this fantastically. So much research is already out there, and hopefully very soon we will have our own original research on the same coming out. So it's how we are connected, and how we want to be in the future.
So three people from different domains working in sync to achieve a common goal. Now, when I tell cannabis, so I think there will be lots of regulations and obstacles around it. Use it for, especially using it for medical, and so, and there's a taboo attached also. So how did you decide that okay, I'll have to get into this? And what were the hurdles that you faced?
The first hurdle is that we never knew. I mean, frankly speaking, if I go back to policies, because of the word taboo, because of the whole confusion and the narcotics angle, nobody ever wanted or never went down to understand what are the legal structures exist for it. And the second is that, is there even a medicinal use case or not, right? I mean, frankly speaking, I have heard, prior to starting up in cannabis, I did know some of the other benefits, but then it is true for a lot of herbs as well, right? And the whole taboo did not allow us to take an in-depth jump into understanding the regulatory, the flow of things right from the plant to the product you can kind of create. So a lot of my time went on to rightfully understand each and every element of it. So I had to meet and speak to regulators from various offices, from health ministry, from finance ministry, revenue department, and obviously narcotics people, to understand what can we do and how can we go about it. So India has always understood, acknowledged, and documented the medicinal use cases of cannabis leaf. In Ayurveda, there are 191 formulations that use cannabis leaf as an ingredient. So this was something that has always existed as a part of our culture. However, we just did not know it. And a lot of people are now exploring it because this has become a global phenomena. Cannabis and its medicinal use cases as well as industrial use cases, we can talk about that, has become now a global phenomena. The regulators are now embracing it, the rightful use of it. Right, people are now talking about how we can, use it for various medical treatment, because there are so many conditions where there is no treatment available, whether it's the traditional medicines or the allopathic medicines. But cannabis does a wonderful job, and this is all documented. It's not something of my opinion. This is already published and out there, right? I guess this would be a journey for someone to actually just get enlightened how amazing the plant is, and the hurdles for anyone is mostly to understand how and what are the key areas, checkpoints you need to go through. And once you are thorough with it, it's something which can be easily executed. Okay, you don't need some muscle or money, power to do it. Just there's a will that needs to be there, and obviously you have to be very diligent on what you're doing. You have to make sure that you do not let any sort of a misuse to happen, because then it's come back and I'm going to bite to you and the organization and the wonderful plant, right? Because everybody looks into it and looks, observe how things are moving around the uses of the plant. We have a very, rightful dispensing in place as well, from a supply chain point of view, government has done a job way before we thought it is possible. A lot of states governments have made the entire sourcing black and white via their revenue department. So you can actually get it from the government. We buy it from the government, right? We have our own manufacturer's license, and we manufacture under the Ayush license, and then we sell it. So it's very black and white thing. Obviously, one has to know and one has to diligently execute it.
So when we study the business environment, we also study the concepts of how easy or difficult it is for the new entrant to get into this particular space, how to manage competition, and so on. Can you just throw some light, because most of this interview would go to my students and the general entrepreneur enthusiasts, I can call them. How do you see, you are maybe you are one of the early entrants into this particular space, but there are large pharma companies which are already doing big business in the pharma sector. So how do you see to encounter them? So they may also enter this space one day. So what are your plans?
So just to mention, pharma company Pfizer has now moved into medical cannabis, but their concept is more of a phytopharmaceutical approach. The barrier to entry is slightly higher, I felt, because not everybody knows the rightful execution, right? I mean, the entry barriers in the execution is slightly higher than I frankly estimated in the beginning, because having the understanding of right from the plant to manufacturing the product and then marketing the product is slightly higher, given that fact people have not pursued cannabis a lot. The knowledge of its execution is not very strongly built upon. Even a lot of players in the existing market have realized are not very thorough with the all regulators, because individual states have their own cannabis policies, government have its own cannabis policies. The so many, there's a bunch of overlapping regulators with cannabis or hemp policy that needs to be understood. So the first is that the thorough understanding of how to go about a cannabis venture is not at all easily available. It's not at all easily available. You need to dig a lot deeper, talk to a lot of more people to get a very clear understanding of how to proceed. The second remains is that convincing someone to buy a product that contains cannabis is again a huge challenge. Okay, if someone, if there's a patient for whom it's like the last resort, then obviously there is no, that's probably easy for them to accept it. But for doctors to prescribe it, or for someone else with condition to go about it, it takes a lot of convincing. So the entry barrier, if you say having an exhaustive knowledge, is very important. If you are not thorough with the regulations, not thorough with how to be 100% black and white, it's going to hurt you somewhere or the other down the line, because it is just not about manufacturing and selling. It's about storage, transportations, right? Procurement, and then how to manufacture it. Obviously, manufacturing is a bit of an operational task, which obviously needs to be aced, because ultimately the product has to have the quality that can actually bring out whatever the efficacy we are after, right? So, understanding the regulatory was time consuming, and it is not at all freely available. I'm actually planning to kind of sit down and document it, because since the entry barrier is higher, for us to communicate this to regulators becomes a task. For us to convince the VCs becomes a task, right? Because it's not something that everybody knows, right? So it becomes a task for us to explain things as well. And obviously creating a acceptance is again requires a lot of awareness generation. And on top of that, there are some entities who won't support cannabis ventures. There are payment gateways who won't support hemp businesses. Okay, so these kind of things will comes and go. So the entry barrier is there. It's not easy to execute, but it's very fun, very satisfying and fulfilling to execute it from the plant to the patient approach.
Can you tell me the overall process from plant to the patient? The overall process. Of course, I cannot ask you the processing secrets, but can you just give me an overview how it starts from the plant and how it reaches the patient?
So
supply chain sort of.
Exactly. So this takes me back to the NDPS Act. So NDPS Act is the National Drug Narcotics Policy. Now, in 1985, India got the first narcotics policy. Prior to that, there was no prohibition on cannabis at a federal level. Okay, and what has happened in that is that while defining cannabis, the regulators kept leaf and seeds of the plant out of the definition of cannabis. So, on a federal level, at India's scale, cannabis leaf and hemp seed are non-narcotic substances. Okay, I mean, as per the definition of the central government's policy. Now, these NDPS Act also have provisions for its cultivation. The state revenue departments can cultivate. The government can create its own cultivation policies. Some of the states have went on to formalize and create their own policies of industrial hemp cultivation, which is also a subset, which is also a type of cannabis plant, mostly used for industrial use cases. And some or the other governments are now evaluating how to go about the cultivation. Himachal, Uttarakhand, Goa have been very vocal about it. And so the first thing is that the NDPS has the cannabis. They have defined cannabis, kept cannabis leaf out of the definition. Then there's a provision of medical cannabis to be used for making tinctures or medicinal preparations. And then comes the cultivation and the sourcing, which is the responsibilities for the state governments and the their bodies to execute. Now, there is something called as national policy on the NDPS Act. Okay, so this national policy allows the state revenue departments to collect and distribute cannabis, leaves growing across India. Okay, so India has a very strong narrative when it comes to cannabis, whether it is your, social use, mostly famous around Holi. If you just look at or gaze around UP, there are bhang shops that sells, there are government bhang shops that sells cannabis leaf infused products. Then you have the whole religious aspects of it, offering it to a god, and then the whole, medicinal aspect from the Ayurveda and the other traditional medicines. So, owing to this whole stronger narrative, the provision has been created to collect the wildly growing cannabis leaves and distribute among manufacturers or whosoever is a license holder. Now, so for us as a company to operate, first thing I require is a manufacturer's license from the Ministry of Ayush if I'm operating under the Ayush or the Ayurvedic medicine. The second is that based on the license, we are granted quotas as we want for procuring cannabis leaf from the state revenue department. Okay, and then we manufacture the product and sell via the doctors or depending upon what kind of a product is. There are some non-prescription products and there are some prescription products. So howsoever you decide of what kind of product you make, you can dispense it. So currently, it is the whole supply chain is purely controlled by the government. Government source either from the wildly growing cannabis plant or cultivate the cannabis plant from their, I believe, set of farmers that they work with.
Thanks. Now, when you come out with your products, so maybe there are ointments or oils or tablets, whatever. So, do you think for your particular product, does packaging play a vital role?
Oh, packaging plays. I mean, post manufacturing, right? When you are out there in the market, when you have to convince people to accept your product, packaging plays a very strong role because packaging marketing, you can't just get away from that, right? I mean, even for doctors to actually build a trust, I believe packaging is something which
Sorry for interrupting. I'll give you a background why I asked.
Sure.
If you see Baba Ramdev's products, they're not, the packaging is very simple. It's not that, the funky or, very sophisticated packing. Maybe what's required to keep it, safe or not getting spoiled, they have just packed it. But they are leading players today, and even others are entering that domain, and they're especially toothpaste and all large multinationals could not compete with them very effectively. So when it comes to Ayurveda, does packaging play a very crucial role? That's the reason why I asked you.
Now there are two things to understand, frankly. One is if you look at the traditional brands, and the second is you look at the new age brands. Okay, I wouldn't call any company a traditional brand, but the giants have probably been part of more of a traditional way of marketing things. With Patanjali, they have a huge brand ambassador, like a global face. So for them, it's packaging, I guess, gets subsidized, right? When you have someone with an influential person, kind of a leading face of the organization about the product. So I guess you have to figure out what compensates for what things, right? But for us, without any face promoting us, our product is the only salesperson, I would say, just for the sake of argument. And obviously the looks kind of attracts people to, if it is placed out on some shelf, right? And something that looks beautiful, something that attracts you to kind of engage your attention, that is something you're going to pick up and read and then figure out whether to buy or not, right? So packaging from that point of view, if you're going from a retail chain, makes sense. A lot of new age wellness companies focused on Ayurvedic products have been exhaustively and beautifully packaging products because everyone is selling something or the good ingredient in them. but then we have to be at least known, right? I mean, sales happen. There's a fourth channel of sales, right? First is the awareness, right? That people know about you, right? So this can help to create the awareness. Second comes the desire, to buy the product. Then comes the action, right? I'm going to be buying it, and then you buy it, right? So if we miss out on the first awareness generation and the desire part, there will never be the end of it, right? So it makes sense to create packaging that can at least gain the attention of consumers, and then obviously if they find it useful for them, they can actually have the whole intent to buy and then buy it. So I think it's a mix of things, I would say, frankly.
Many of these wellness brands have come up with their outlets in airports and some premium locations. It's not just sales. Maybe to bring in that awareness, they come up with these particular stores. Is this particular concept relevant to your line of business?
Yes, detaching the prescription or a doctor only medication. When you look at the general product which are useful to majority of the population, whether it's a arthritis relief product or a skincare product, right? It makes sense for an awareness generation. But again, how much money you can infuse, because those are expensive, very expensive approach to take. I mean, I'm not sure how much, because I know that every time I buy something from airports, I pay a huge cost to it, and which is get paid. It's because the airport authorities charge the retailers and then gets reflected back into how I pay it back. But yes, in terms of awareness generation, all possible physical touch points, I would use the word touch points, are important. Airport is obviously one of the where you get a traffic of probably people with a slightly heavier wallet, I would say. And if you are a luxury, if you're someone who's selling a luxury commodity, it really makes sense. But then if you're not someone with a luxury commodity, I'm not sure if that kind of an expense to make or a expense or a cost makes a lot of sense for someone to go about it, because mostly I have seen big brands around airports and all those areas, right? So that's again, what kind of a consumer you're trying to target depends where you want to place your product at.
Now, coming back to your future prospects of your business, where do you see yourself in next 5 years, or what's the pathway you have laid?
So, one key thought process around the company has always been a research-backed organization, and obviously creating products that have efficacy, and hence research backing the same. In the next 5 years, if you ask me, we look at to have an exhaustive distribution network of the products, published a lot more researches. We have currently two papers aligned, two papers in progress around what we have done in the last 9 months of our operations. Create more and more awareness, create more products with, so how do I say, let me just take a step back when I talk about the product, is that cannabis as a central herb has a lot of potency to deliver, but when co-prescribed with other herbs, the efficacy increases manifold, right? I mean, I'm not making a medical suggestion, but cannabis when prescribed with ashwagandha has a higher, result when it compared to cannabis only, right? So creating polyherbal formulations for different ailments that can be used for consumers for a for catering or having a better efficacy, something which is a very central thought. I would like to build upon more on it, try to capture as many as conditions we can, because generalization may not give the exact output. So creating probably more of a verticals of different condition specific medicine is something that we are deeply focused upon and would research and obviously convert it into a acceptable and obviously products. Backing it purely by data numbers of efficacy is something that's just non-negotiable for us. We're going to do it. I mean, I come out from a very strong data background. For me to talk about anything beyond data is not even acceptable for me to talk about that doesn't sound like me, right? So how can I convert into a venture that is not at all working on a data backed or a research backed formulations? So two key things moving forward is that generating as much as original research and creating formulations that can help people solve their or help people in their wellness journey will be the primary focus of the organization.
Nice. Sumit, now we have understood what made you to get into this entrepreneurial venture. We have understood the various processes of your business, the products, and your path ahead. Now, I would like you to give a piece of advice to our budding entrepreneurs as to how they have to move ahead.
My advice, well, I frankly speak, I'm way too soon to offer advice because in my head, I believe that there's a lot more to be achieved for me to be someone to offer advice. But
No,
what I would
sorry to
summarize,
interrupt you, Sumit. Why I'm asking you, I'll tell you. Once you're successful, okay, you are ready to give the advice. Once you have failed, okay, your advice is taken as a failure. But the person who is undergoing that venture, the process, his advice is much more important because he's facing all the positives, negatives at simultaneously. I think his advice is more relevant than either who have failed or who have succeeded. That's why I'm asking you.
so uh, a lot of people have different idea around why they want to do a startup. Okay, some and this is a friend told me, right? There are two ways. There are only for two reasons people do a startup: either for the freedom, like the personal freedom they want to have it to do and execute things, or second is the money. They're only here for the money because a lot of people have generated wealth via startups. So first thing is that make a conviction on what you're really in for. Second is that narrow down, figure out one idea and execute it as soon as possible. Uh, Sitting on in any idea will not yield any result. If you have an idea in your head, if you believe there's something which is worth executing, execute it. Small scale, miniature scale, just do it because doing it will get you to the next big step. Okay, doing it will ensure that you've put your foot in the water. You understand how deep the water is. You understand how cold or warm the water is. Okay, and then only you can actually create the next path. So execute as soon as possible. Whatever thought you have in your head, just do a bit of a thorough research, or even don't do a research. Make the first. I would say is that I guess somewhere I read that the first draft or the first version of anything is bad. It's pathetic. Okay, but the thing about the first version is that it is the sole reason that the improvements come across. Okay, if today I have to even compare our existing packaging to the first packaging we launched, the difference is mammoth. But to launch, to execute and learn is important. So launch it, do it, and then figure out what's next. That's this whole advice. It's just do it as soon as you can. Big, small does not matter. Execution is the key.
Thank you, Sumit. So when you spoke, I just remember one quote by Mark Twain that said, "The secret of getting ahead is getting started."
Absolutely, absolutely. Once you get started, trust me, I have known so many things by doing it. Okay, that I may not never known if I were just evaluating it. You can have all the R&Ds done, all the insights onto it, but unless you're not in the space, not in the market, not talking to your consumers after you have made a product or made a sale or anyone who uses it, you can just not grow it. It's impossible.
Thank you, Sumit. It was great talking to you. Thank you for all the insights given. Friends, with this, I would like to end our today's conversation with Sumit. So we'll have to understand that everyone can tell you about risk, especially we as teachers. But entrepreneurs like Sumit can always tell you what's the reward side of it. Thank you, Sumit. It was great
Thank you
talking
so
to
much,
you.
sir. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure being here.